We left off with seaweed, which really is brown algae. I guess I misspoke with that. There's golden algae and brown algae in this supergroup. And one of the things about brown algae is you do have it tends to attach to rocks. It has this ability um, to defy gravity, which, when you think about it, it's one of the first organisms that did that with this stipe. And also the thing about brown algae is it exists in alternative generations. And we'll move on to the next slide to talk about that. Before we do, sorry, some terms that are new to you, I guess. I would assume if you haven't had a science class, we speak about sets of chromosomes as two matching pair or two pair. One, generally one that you have gotten from your biological mother, one from your biological father. When you just have half of that pair, we call that a haploid or a 1N, and that's the first term you have here, is one set of chromosomes. So a lot of times that's what you'll have in what's a gamete, and you do have that term. Fifth one down is the haploid reproductive cell, sperm or egg. And then a diploid is the 2N, two sets of chromosomes. So you have two pair of the same number chromosome, and that two pair generally line up, match up with regard to their DNA, but there can be some variances because of diversity. Mitosis is the cell division, is the word for cell division of body cells, somatic cells. This is cell division without any diversity added to it, so that just the cells dividing because they need more of themselves. Two identical diploid cells will be made with mitosis. Meiosis is this process of reproductive cell division where a precursor cell or stem cell divides and basically halves the amount of chromosomal information that you started out with, so that you go from a diploid to a haploid in meiosis. Gamete, we already said what this was. This is a reproductive cell. Zygote is a diploid, so zygote is the result of the sperm and the egg getting together. You have half the chromosomal data from the sperm, half from the egg. The two get together to form the zygote, and that then is a whole new structure, a whole new entity, a whole new living, well, basically a baby, if you want to use that term. And then this alternate generations, that's what the brown algae does. This perform or lives in this alternate generations, where both the haploid and diploid can be multicellular and also can actually have a lifespan much longer than what we think of when we think of a gamete. For example, sperm cells live about 72 hours is all. They don't have much of a lifespan, and they're single cell. The egg can live for, once it's fertilized, it can only live for a couple of days, but certainly the female makes all of her eggs while she's in the womb, so the eggs themselves live for a while. But they aren't multicellular, any of them. And that's the thing about this alternative generation idea, is particularly in brown algae, you have sporophytes that can be quite large. As a matter of fact, the image that we just saw was a sporophyte, was multiple cells. Those then can be released and become zoospores. Those zoospores can actually multicellularly grow into male and female zoospores. Fertilization happens, and then you have developed another sporophyte. you do have this image in your textbook, and you can look through that. So the sporophyte is a multicellular diploid, some plants and particularly our brown algae. And then the spore is the haploid cell that's produced by a sporophyte. It will divide and become a gametophyte. And here you have the image. This particular algae is cherished by particularly the Japanese, and if you like Japanese food, as well as many brown algae, very long brown algae are used for food, for various, they're very healthy, various plant commodities eaten by more than just Japanese. Japanese think of it as a delicacy, I guess. And also used to thicken foods, and for some puddings and some salad dressings, as your book says, brown algae. And this is where you have this alternate generations, acclimating ourselves to the image that we have. You have the whole blue portion. So the blue portion is more towards the right. That's where you have the haploid part of the species in the blue portion. In the pink portion, you have the diploid. Remember, haploid is an individual group of chromosomes, so an individual one of each of the set of chromosomes, I guess I might say, whereas a diploid is two of each of the set of chromosomes. So what we'll start out with is what looks familiar to us is the sporophyte, and that's the plant with the root-like structures, with the stalk-like structures and the leaf-like structures, not actually those. In those leaf-like structures, you have the sections of sporangia. They then, by meiosis, create these spores that become, the spores are all the same, but they differentiate into female and male gametophytes. Female and male gametophytes actually can be multicellular, have a lifespan. They create sperm and eggs that get together, fertilization, and what you are is at the bottom of the cycle, and we're going from the haploid to the diploid, because our sperm and an egg got together to the diploid. That creates the zygote. Zygote then develops into a sporophyte, and the whole thing starts over again. That's what's considered the alternate generations between haploid and diploid. Happens in brown algae and some plants. The next group, the alveolates, they have these sacs beneath the surface of the plasma membrane. All are unicellular, many some are photosynthetic. Alveolites, or the alveoli sacs, you may not know this, but that's what your lungs are made of. Your lungs are made of alveoli. They have the ability to take oxygen in via your respiratory system. That oxygen then can diffuse into the blood. And so we have something in common, I guess you might say. And this is the next of the supergroup of the SAR supergroup. It's the A in the SAR supergroup. We just finished with the S in the SAR supergroup. And here you have you actually can see that alveolar sac. They have a large flagellum also on their alveolar sac with regard to using oxygen or gases of some sort. The next in this particular group, the dinoflagellates, these probably, I mean, you know about these via the news, where there are red tides. There seems to be a lot of red tides, particularly in the news in Florida. And they have, the thing about them is they have a reinforced cellulose plate in their around them, so it kind of gives them that extra protection. They're abundant both in marine and freshwater, and the problem with regard to red tides is fertilizers and some of the things that we dump into water is their main source of food. So if you have a dump of something that they really like as food, they grow in out of proportion in comparison to other things that are living in the ocean, and they hog all the oxygen, so nothing else can live. They cause these blooms called red tide. They also give off a toxin that then can kill fish and other invertebrates, can be harmful to humans also. Those are dinoflagellates. The next is the next group we have heard of because Plasmodium, which is one of the apicomplexians that causes malaria. And so this would be the causative agent for malaria. And one of the ideas behind this is they are parasites. So apicomplexians are parasites. They are one particular species causes malaria in humans. They are on one end there's an apex that contains complex organelles that are specialized for penetrating a host, and this is what allows them to actually get into the mosquito in the first place. They have sexual and asexual stages. They require 2 or more different hosts for completion. So what we want to do is kind of look at this cycle so we can put this in our head as, oh, that is the group that causes malaria. So you can put this together with a parasitic group that causes malaria. So we'll start with some pesky mosquito at the top that's biting through the skin. So the top mosquito biting through the skin, the Plasmodium, the Plasmodium is in the saliva of the mosquito, and the mosquito will put its probe in to the skin, secrete the saliva to keep the blood flowing, and so then the blood will go into the mosquito, and if it doesn't get swatted, it will fly away. In the saliva that then went into the host, which would be you or I as a human, there are some cells that will infect the Plasmodium will infect the liver cells. They will stay on the liver cells until they are released as these merozoites, the MEROZOITES. Don't have to know that, but it's just interesting. And they then attack red blood cells. They go into a red blood cell. As soon as they fill up the red blood cell and they burst, then they burst into the blood itself. And this filling and bursting of these in the red blood cells is what causes the spike in the fever and then chills of somebody who has malaria. And then what happens is the next mosquito comes along. Remember, this one requires 2 different hosts. The next mosquito comes along, bites this particular person with the saliva, and then is also taking in this blood. This blood then goes to the gut of the mosquito, and that's where the microgamete is created. So you have both a male and a female gamocyte that then is ingested by the second mosquito. That turns into a zygote. That zygote turns into a cyst that can start the whole thing over again. This is the sexual, asexual stages where you have 2 hosts of this disease called malaria. Sorry I made a boo-boo, but we will pick up on this slide in the next teaching time.